I'm backstage at the London EV show with the Transport for London's Alex Gilbert. Alex, how are you today? Are you enjoying the show?
I am very much enjoying the show. Having a lot of fun with you guys as well here.
Of course.
That in itself has been a highlight of the whole show.
Of course.
But it is good. It's very good to have... probably bring this closer might help at this point.
Of course.
Really good to obviously have people out there together, mixing at the moment. Bit of a challenge doing that, and everyone is being very safe, we should say, in doing it. But it is good to have people together at last, networking and chatting about the future of electrification.
Yeah, great. So you are the head of electrification, so it makes sense that you're here at the London EV show to talk to us about it. So you spoke yesterday, twice actually, didn't you, on the panel as well?
Yeah.
Speaking about what the Transport for London are going to be doing and what the plans around charging infrastructure in London are. So can you tell us a little bit about the road to 2030 in terms of Transport for London?
Sure, absolutely. So we are hugely involved now, increasingly more involved in that electrification piece.
Yes.
It's not one that we are going to do just by ourselves. Again, it needs all the players involved, so all the boroughs and other public sector operators, but of course all the private sector guys, many of whom are here at the moment, all in some sort of glorious, harmonious partnership to try and make this happen.
Yeah.
But we certainly have our own plans, and we touched on some of that yesterday, for how we're going to increase electrification, certainly assisting people in going electric, thinking about taxis, about fleets, about buses. Some areas, of course, we have more control than others, as you'd expect. But my particular focus really around rapid charging, so that high-speed charging that we can provide to people that goes alongside slower charging of electric vehicles as well. Everything's in the mix here. There isn't sort of one solution that's the right one.
Yeah.
We need a little bit of all of it to try and make people make that switch, to try and improve London's air quality and decarbonisation agenda. So that's what we're targeting, and that's ramping up very, very quickly now, all through this decade, and hopefully we'll hit 2030 and beyond. Great.
So you did mention yesterday in your talk, for those that missed it, that you are actually interested at TfL in collaborating with private companies across the board. So how could somebody get in touch with you or someone at the TfL if they want to kind of collaborate with you in this effort?
We are indeed very, very keen. Again, great being here, because the amount of business cards and little scribbled email addresses that my team has got down just from this event alone is fantastic. And I know a lot of people are online. LinkedIn messages flying at me constantly at the moment. Yeah,
he's getting hounded.
Which is great to see, though, because this is obviously a growing area. You'll know this full well, amazingly quickly. You know, just a few years ago, the whole sort of very nascent EV industry and these conferences were hard to put on. Now, so many people interested, coming from all their different, the old school car people, the energy, more techie people, the engineers are involved, that kind of, it feels like there's a part for everyone to play. We are, as you say, really keen on that collaboration. So whether it's building out hubs, people with solutions around energy, storage, EV charging, we want to talk to the vehicle OEMs as well, the manufacturers, really keen to keep collaborating with them, as we do at TfL. And there's a lot of official ways to engage, which I obviously urge people to do, but equally just for getting in contact, you know, whether it's with me and the wider team, you know, do please get in touch, and we'd love to see what people have got, what solutions they've got for London and indeed beyond. Great.
So what is the plan? What does it look like, this road to 2030? What are TfL going to be doing in the coming years?
Yeah, so if I take sort of my area, I suppose initially, and the one obviously I know the best, which is building rapid charging hubs. So again, this is, if it's not immediately obvious, so for electric vehicles, getting charging infrastructure. But as we need a few thousand, roughly, charging points, high-speed charging points, the quickest and most efficient way of doing that, and this is again part of the Mayor's EV infrastructure strategy, is to put them through hubs. So to actually have hubs of multiple points, so more than 6, maybe up to 10 or 20, where you can come in, obviously you can charge your car, but you then have a much wider, better experience as well. So maybe facilities, amenities, things that can really give you a really great experience. You can enjoy that time, you know, optimize that time. And whether that's for, you know, you as a member of the public, whether that's obviously fleets, taxis who have to be on the road and have to keep driving, can't use public transport often for what they do, you know, really, really keen that we provide them with what they need. And we're going to keep ramping that up. We want to build as many as we can, again, in partnership with the private sector as well, keen to collaborate, and get involved even when we're not building directly, supporting others in doing that, because the wider decarbonisation, air quality piece is what we care about, not just sort of what we can put in the ground tomorrow.
Yeah, no, definitely. So in terms of obviously collaboration with private companies, which is great, by the way, is there any kind of support that's going to be available for people to get involved with that? Because obviously it's very expensive to, let's say, build a hub or to put certain technologies in place or to dig the ground up and lay the framework to be able to, accommodate something like a rapid charger. Because, I mean, if you're doing 250, 350 kilowatts, that needs quite a power source to be able to, handle one of those, let alone several.
Absolutely. So we're very aware of that and the challenges that it has, again, across the country.
Yeah.
Sometimes people say London's, even harder. I don't know. It's challenging anywhere, frankly, getting that power, as you say. So number of ways in which we're working with people and also the distribution network operators and others to try and assist in that. For several years, we've had a rapid charging procurement framework.
Okay.
We had 5 providers that were on that. The aim of that was to have 300 chargers in by the end of 2020, which we achieved. So those first 300 that have gone into London, we've now got about 650, and so about half of which have come in just through that framework. So it's been very, very successful. That allowed us to put 5 private sector operators on the framework, and we did a lot of that work in bringing that power to the site, doing a lot of that upfront grunt that people find so hard, and then allowing others to be able to come in and actually be the charge point operator of the site. So going forward, we don't know exactly how that will work and how we're going to liaise with everyone, but we're acutely aware that the grid and power constraints are huge. We need to get that right. It needs work at the sort of the grid end, the kind of heavy duty end, but also a lot of on-site answers that, again, I'm sure many in the room will talk about in more depth than I, but ideas around storage, whether that's battery or other, around microgrid, a lot of other, really clever, geeky ideas there. Very geeky, go geeky rabbit hole, but they're brilliant because, again, we're all learning as we go, so we're all finding out the best way of delivering hubs, and that's why it's such an exciting space, because we're all learning as we go here. Yeah,
it's very innovative as well, isn't it? And I mean, even though obviously the law is changing regarding vehicle manufacture from 2030, EV energy and emissions, it seems so far away, but it's still not. It's quite close, and we're in a very innovative time where things are changing really quickly. Like you said, obviously we've got the pandemic. One thing that I did want to ask you is, if you are going to have these charging hubs that are run by the TfL, how are we going to make charging fair for people? Because I mean, across the country, not just in London, there's all different amounts of money that it's charging per kilowatt. So where I live, up north in Yorkshire, it might be 25p per kilowatt for a 50 kilowatt charger. But down here, you could be looking at 40 pence. So how are we going to make sure that that's fair for people?
Yeah, so it's a really, really good question. And again, it's one I know that came up yesterday. And again, the truth is, you've got to be clear here. TfL can't control the pricing that's obviously charged. I mean, clearly not in Yorkshire and elsewhere. But also that innovation that you mentioned. There's a lot of innovation around pricing, around payment systems and everything. Now, that's fantastic because there's so many good ideas. There's so many different ways to pay, far more than in the old sort of petrol model.
Yeah, right? Of course.
But in doing that, again, we need to be very clear and very concise in how we actually define that, and it does need some new regulation. It does need a firm understanding of what the price could be, whether caps are needed, whether we allow the price to sort of come down. We touched on yesterday, for instance, if you've got renewably generated power and it's the middle of a lovely sunny day, well, as that 25p that you're paying, maybe that drops down to 5p, maybe it drops down to 1p. Well, that's fantastic. That's brilliant news. You're loving that as a driver.
Yeah, loving that as a driver,
but are we creating other issues, and are people now driving out of their way to get there, to sort of gobble up? Is that creating congestion and all those other things? So the truth is, we don't know the answers to these. We'd love to think that you could do that. But of course, it comes back to the knowledge and awareness of people. And this is a bit of a geeky industry. That's great. But we've got to be aware it's got to be mainstream. It can't just be people like us talking about this and understanding what a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour is and all the innovation. Your average person just needs to understand how they can charge. And at the moment, we know that can still be a bit confusing.
Yeah,
different
even
apps.
If people own an EV, they don't always know how to charge it, let's say, at a public charger.
Correct. And it is at times still hard, and that's why, again, we won't go into the rabbit hole of interoperability and contactless payment, but it's why that we've got to make this as easy as possible. Because if we think we're being clever by hundreds of geeky ideas, it isn't, because people just won't understand it.
Yeah.
And you end up again with your early adopters using it, which, as we know at the moment, tends to be certain demographics.
Yeah.
But to get older people, younger people, people with disabilities, that full, accessible, inclusive story, we've got to make that really easy and fair. And again, TfL is going to do all it can, absolutely all it can, to enforce that. But it needs that probably sort of government approach as well to ensure it is as simple as it can be.
No, great. So one thing that you just touched on there, which is really interesting, is the accessibility point. So what kind of solutions have TfL thought about or are speaking about or maybe have in process is there for charging for people with accessibility needs?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fundamental point, actually. It's a meeting I just got out of.
Oh, really?
And,
that's fortunate.
There we go. And speaking about this, really keen to get this right. Obviously, it is absolutely the core of what TfL does. You know, anyone that's been involved with things like step-free access knows just how key this is, that we get this right across our whole estate and everything that we do. Some of which is you know, very, very much focused on this. And then also newer areas like EV charging, where I have to say some of the quality of charging points and hubs around the country isn't good enough from an inclusive and accessible point of view. So everything that we're going to do is going to have that in regard. And I suppose it's worth saying at that point, not just what people maybe think as this sort of obvious accessibility, i.e. can you get there with a wheelchair, doesn't have a curb in the way that stops you, doesn't have a screen that's 5 foot high that you can't reach. So that you think about. But I've certainly become increasingly aware and been on my own learning journey about a lot of the sort of mental health aspects of this, of how you can account for a society when more people labelled as autistic or dyslexic. So how do you actually make this sort of mental health aware and accessible from that front, which of course makes it fully inclusive, that whatever your mental, physical issue, you can still charge, you can have that. And if it's a challenge, then you've got support as and when required. But that's something I think we've all got to be aware of with all infrastructure, frankly, that we put in now.
Definitely. So, for example, if someone's going to put a charging point, a private company is going to put a charging point in somewhere in central London, do you have to approve it?
No. At the moment, if it's just a private sector piece of land and a private sector operator, no, there is no requirement on us to approve that. Now, I don't know if that will change going forward, but certainly anything we're building, we can have those standards. Again, this is where, as it stands, EV charging is not a regulated industry, right?
Yeah.
Which does mean that you and I can go off tomorrow and set up our own charging
Let's just set up a charging company, Alex.
Two of us and cameraman. He's in as well. No, he's here in this. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can do that, which again, great, allows for innovation, allows for entrepreneurialism. Make money. But of course, are we going to adhere to the same standards? Are we caring about all those things? So, you know, all we can say is at the moment, anything TfL's doing is to those standards.
Of course.
But it's something, I think, again, frankly, it's incumbent upon the whole industry, including media and everyone, to make sure that the standards of everything else really are where they should be.
Definitely.
So there.
Great. So you mentioned about consumers, obviously, that haven't adopted an EV or maybe not early adopters, maybe more the laggards. How are TfL planning on educating those people? Are you going to be doing some sort of campaign? Is there anything that you're discussing about educating people on how to use EVs or, you know, the different options available?
So I don't know if there are specific sort of education campaigns necessarily. A huge amount of work has been done, I mean, in the broadest sense around the future of transport, which of course is ultimately we still need to be getting 80% of people not using a car within 20 years. By 2041, that's when the Mayor's transport strategy has stated that we want. So that's, to be clear, 80% that are using public transport or cycling or walking, whatever form that might be. So we know that the overall sort of car park of London will come down. That's key. But for those cars that do continue, and they always will, taxis, fleets, etc., we need to green those fleets. I mean, that's key. Yeah. So in doing that, a lot of work's done. Infrastructure task force work, huge amount of published information, charging standards. So some of the stuff we're talking about here about how we have those, so the actual full charge point protocols that go in, huge amount of work has been done there. But I think there's probably more that can be done, frankly, across the whole industry, which is that education piece. Even within hubs, I mean, something I'm quite keen is that, as you said, maybe someone that's bought an EV but just doesn't understand this. So the first time they come into a hub, you don't hit them with this sort of massive, geeky kind of like, just, you know, pillar with big words about
CCS,
energy.
DCS, you know,
Right.
DS,
Yeah,
Chademo. What was that?
They don't,
Yeah,
exactly. People
yeah.
just, there's no way they're understanding this. Actually, how can we make that experience better?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you could have a whole bunch of people there educating. That comes with a cost.
Of course.
So you've got to think about this. What's the information we can publish? What more can we do with apps online so that people have that? I mean, it's massively increasing the awareness. I mean, we know that, right? Just if we'd have had this conference a few years ago, people were still going, you know, what does EV stand for?
Tinfoil hats.
Now we've got probably people like you and the work that you've done. There's massive awareness now. And I think almost anyone on the street is aware that there's EV as an alternative to petrol or diesel.
Or diesel.
That's fine. But the majority haven't bought one yet.
Yes.
And they won't tomorrow. So kind of what more can we do to come back on your question with a whole other question, which
Yes.
what more can we all do to try and increase that awareness and cover that going forward?
I think that we, like you mentioned, you've done some awareness pieces, but I think on the whole, if government, if Transport for London and, like you said, OEMs, manufacturers do some sort of educational piece that is accessible to people. Like you said, not the whole geeky jargon. I think a lot of it is geeky jargon and people feel like that's too difficult for me to understand. It doesn't make me feel good to read that because I don't understand. I don't want to get involved with it. And obviously we're changing a paradigm. People have got range anxiety, which is largely psychological, but in order to be able to change that psychology, we have to do educational pieces. So, for example, my suggestion would be on the tube, you've got all this amazing advertising space. If you started to utilise that to educate people, all right, you're not going to make money for that space. However, you are going to convert people around to your thinking because even if they don't read it consciously, subconsciously they're taking it in, they become more comfortable with the idea. You've got all these amazing places, all these estates to put, you know, marketing materials. So you could utilise it. And that's just a small thing that you could do. You know, you've got little things on the tannoy or, you know, these little touch points. That's just an idea. It's just a start.
It is. And I don't know, I'm now thinking as you come back there, I'm thinking of even like recorded messages at hubs explaining how things work and a bit more of a it's as easy as 1, 2, 3 kind of talking people through it a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's fundamentally, we don't want the geeky approach. We want this to become absolutely mainstream. I mean, I'm sure someone has said this before me, but always think about the fact that if you explain to people now, and maybe from the perspective of 20 years' time looking back, as to what we do now with petrol, and hence how this must have been when people first got cars, it's absolutely insane. Like, there's a cap in your car that you're going to put this highly flammable liquid in and then drive it around, and, you know, you're going to go to this place that's often a bit dirty, a bit sort of stinky, noisy.
You can get loads of stuff from there as well at the same time,
So, and like kind of that whole experience, and of course we're going to look back and go, what? So this new petrol thing that you changed, you know, you didn't just have that in your home or in your workplace or whatever, and you go, no, we didn't ever have it there. You had to go to a special place and fill up with petrol. And I think it will just seem insane because ultimately, once you've got something that's better, you never go back.
No.
I mean, no one drives an EV and thinks, I want to go back to those days of filling up. Like, no one.
No. So do you drive an EV?
Yes.
Do you? What do you drive?
Well, I'm currently in an e-mini, but I'm changing it very soon and talking with some of the guys here because I'm going to be changing it soon to another one.
What?
But we've driven for years. Before that, it was, we had the Mercedes E-equivalent, but I'm not very early adopter. I don't want to claim that. People have been doing this for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
But we've been 7 years. And
Wow.
But it's, I mean, again, I don't think you could take any credit for it now because it is just a better driving experience. I'm fortunate enough to be able to charge at home. That's a key thing. Not everyone is. And that's hence why we need on-street and hub
100%.
charging facilities.
Yes.
So, but, you know, I'm able to do that. So for me, you know, it's an absolute pleasure. Never having to go back into a petrol station, which I don't miss. Sorry, petrol station owners and operators out there, but yeah.
No, but that's good. So what are you looking at going to next? Can you say? Come on, share with us. We want to know.
Yeah,
We're
this is
judging
suddenly,
you.
exactly, This is like live EV trials here with Alex
trials.
Gilbert. No, I'll say that the car I last drove in, I believe other brands are available, but I went in the MG ZS and test drove that.
Oh, it's cool.
This is sort of family SUV. Okay, have you been in this?
The new one I'm
This is
getting
the new
to
one,
test for review on the 21st of this month.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, so is that what you're looking at?
Yes. You know, I said earlier no one's had an EV and got back, but you've spoken to way more people as. Do you know of people that have bought an EV and gone, actually, I miss the the noise or the thrust or the whatever of a petrol.
They didn't miss that. So I'm going to be honest, I don't drive an EV because I'm in a 3-year lease, and 2 years ago is very different to how it is now. And having been to this conference, I mean, I've test driven a lot of different EVs, and even had, them for a week or 48 hours. So I believe I could live with one now. But yeah, I do know people that have initially had a Tesla a few years ago before the range was as good as it is now, and because of the journeys that they do, they've actually gone back. It's not because of the thrust, it's not because of the smell and the noise or anything like that. It's literally because the distances that they travel, it just didn't work for them at the time. But as the infrastructure changes, obviously they were very early adopters. The infrastructure's getting better now.
Yeah.
So, and obviously technology is getting better now. The range on a Tesla is more than it's ever been. So I think that they might change their mind. But yes, I do know people that have gone and switched back. But I think as things progress, technology, infrastructure, that they probably would revert back. And I mean, they probably won't have a choice in a few years because the tax will be insane, right?
This is, as you say, so that's interesting to hear. And I suppose, and of course, having said I don't know any, I'm sure, and even before that, many that tried this in the 2000s and the early 2010s.
Well, it's the early technology.
Very hard. And I'm sure when they went around in their Gee Whiz, if anyone remembers them and things like that, probably they might have thought again.
Yes.
But I suppose, to comment on that, and you mentioned about your lease, I mean, this is the nature of purchasing. And firstly, environmentally, in the majority of cases with anything in life, seeing something to the end of its life is more efficient than ditching it for something new.
I know, but it's so hard to get out of that mentality, Alex.
Right, indeed. But even just like I get a lot with other hats on, gas boilers, air source heat. But, should I scrap my gas boiler and put an air source? No, you should see your gas boiler to the end of its life. Probably. Obviously, every home's different, every blah, blah, blah.
Of course.
But because that is better for the environment, and then you move to more efficient things.
I would with a boiler, but a car I'm driving, and I want to enjoy the experience, and I get bored pretty quick.
But then it seems like in a year's time, or whenever if you've got a 3 or 4 year lease here, but when you do come to that, there you go. Those people with leasing, you know where to target your advertising campaigns because
Well, I work with them as partners.
Well, there you go. Even easier, people.
This was even before I chose to lease.
Yeah, exactly. And it does. We've been on rolling 3-year leasing. Obviously, a huge amount of people in this country. A lot of the fleets, which are fundamental to this, it's all lease deals. So we all know that transferring over fleets, whatever, is going to be fundamental to this, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen in the next few years. No. Again, as I probably don't need to tell you or your audience, all the manufacturers are now going to EV, but you're talking often 7-year lead times from full length of time to market. So this isn't going to be solved tomorrow. But because of the long lead times, it means they're all now looking at EV. So it's when people say about, do you think 20 or 30 happen? I'm quite confident about 2030 because I just think all the manufacturers will have had to have moved by then anyway. Otherwise, they know they're dead in the water.
Yeah, because of legislation as well.
So, and again, we're mostly talking about the UK, different, of course, in a lot of the developing world and others, very, very different. But here, if you're a manufacturer and you've not got EVs in your range now, I mean, you're in big trouble in 5 years' time. Some. So, okay.
They do biofuel. So there's Dasher, which pride themselves on being a very affordable brand new car. So you can actually buy a car from them that is under 10 grand, which, 10 years ago was great. You could get something really decent for 10 grand, but obviously inflation means that you can't really get that much brand new for 10 grand anymore.
No, can't think of
which is horrible, really, if you think about it. But they do biofuel, so they do LPG gas.
Okay.
So you can use a fuel engine and also LPG gas converter. LPG gas is actually really all right for the environment. It's green energy.
Yeah, I mean, whole different debate here around biofuels versus hydrogen versus electric.
Yeah.
But everything has a role to play. We'll leave it on that. Glib.
Okay, is that following Juliana's speech yesterday about biofuels?
Oh, I didn't even know that one. I didn't even hear.
Oh, didn't you?
No.
About the burning, that biofuel actually isn't very good for you because you're still burning something. And then obviously we're not just talking about like the environment. We're talking about health in terms of our lungs and breathing.
Indeed, and that's why, I mean, again, speaking from a London perspective, mostly the push here is for electrification. Biofuels have had a very tainted story in terms of the sustainability of them, the burning of them.
Dodge.
But ultimately, I don't want to speak ill of the industry because I think there are some fantastic biofuel initiatives. I think all of these have a role to play depending on the different types of transport or energy use. Again, we're talking about transport today, but of course there's many other types of energy use and there'll be a role for everything somewhere. And again, I think hydrogen's got a role to play. For me, though, the role for hydrogen isn't in small vehicles, right, in LGVs. So I don't see it there. I know others do, and might be others in the room that do, and they can say their bit.
Yeah.
But at a much larger end, shipping, aviation, etc., maybe hydrogen's got a role. But without going down that rabbit hole, we've gone.
There's many.
Many here. But we've gone for the electrification piece, which I suppose comes back to what you were saying, and that getting people comfortable with it, making them understand it. The actual driving piece, again, you know this better than me. It is easy because the cars are actually simpler, right? There's fewer moving
Instant
parts.
torque. So much fun to drive.
There's just fewer. Everyone that drives an EV just knows there's less that goes wrong. You don't need to understand all of the things that we get bombarded with by mechanics. This has gone wrong, that's gone wrong. You're like, oh, how does that work again?
Yeah.
How does that?
Yeah.
There's far less that's ever going to go wrong.
True.
So most of the stuff that is going to go wrong is stuff you get. Something's wrong inside the car. A seat's broken or this or that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all easily fixable. So I think, again, once people have that experience, all of that's great. It's just getting the charging right and obviously getting the vehicles over here, because as we know, we don't have enough EVs.
The microchip problem, but EVs need more semiconductor microchips than the average ICE car. That's a problem.
It has been said that they are computers on wheels.
Yes, they are, and batteries on wheels actually can power many of the things with them. Yeah,
exactly, batteries and computers, and that's only going to increase, right? I mean, in every facet of our life, sensor technology, Internet of Things, etc. They will be moving battery plus internet capability on wheels.
Of course.
And until we have connected autonomous, at which point we're not involved anymore, particularly, just to sit in it.
Yes.
That trend will grow. And again, how we all understand that, because again, that could confuse people. I know actually a lot of people don't like Teslas and things because they find it's like playing a computer game. They kind of walk in them. Well, clearly for you.
For me, yeah.
But others have hated that because they've gone in and said, I want a car. A car, I grab the wheel and grab an experience. Even in an EV or a petrol, whatever. But a Tesla's sort of a bit like, you feel like you're almost autonomous. It's sort of like dap, and sit back.
Yeah, it is.
And again,
the Jetsons.
Horses for courses. I mean, that's, but
great. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us today about what the Transport for London's plans are, or?
I think we've covered the vast majority.
I think we've been nearly down a few rabbit holes today.
We've covered a fair bit. A lot of detail, as ever. This sector does get very geeky very quickly.
We did get quite geeky, didn't we?
But we can go geekier.
Yes.
Join us for part 2, full geek.
Full geek mode.
Yeah. But no, it's fantastic, and just cheers for being here. Cheers for everyone getting involved.
Thank you.
Fantastic to have conferences back on, people doing this. It all helps, right? So let's keep it up.
Great. And just lastly, can you tell me how you felt about the show? Have you enjoyed it? Have you made some good connections for TfL?
Yeah, great show. And by the way, love this venue. Should say that. I know it's somewhere different next year, so maybe I shouldn't be plugging this venue. But no, it is cool. It's really cool. And a place like this on Upper Street in London, which is one of the best streets in London, frankly, for going out, having fun and doing that, which we hope people are doing. It is December. There's obviously a bit of a somber mood across the country right now, and whatever. We know we're a bit exactly the same as last year right now with the feeling, which is why we do need events like this, whether physical or virtual. I know hundreds and hundreds. I heard 1,000
people tuned in yesterday to the London.
So there's 1,000 have tuned in to hear me babble on about something.
Yeah.
So we love that, and hopefully as this sector grows and grows, which again, very cool to be part of something that's growing and on the up, right? That's not often in life you can say you're there at something that's really only going to increase. So that's quite a good feeling as well.
Okay, great. Well, thanks ever so much for joining us and taking the time to get geeky with us here at the London EV Show. Alex Gilbert, everybody. Thank you.